Hello, I'm Rudranath Sanyal. Welcome to War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. Once again, we thank all our viewers who keep in touch with us from different parts of the country and abroad. Well, viewers, in recent weeks, you must have noticed that the world has started to take notice of the rise of India, both as a military power and for India's rapid economic growth. In fact, some of the nation states have started calling India a developed nation already. So in this edition of War and Peace, we will examine why so many important nation states are keen on strengthening their ties with India. So our lead topic for you in this edition of War and Peace is India and the world. And on popular demand from our file shot segment, we will once again bring you a vignette on an epitome of communal harmony. Our guests for you in this edition of War and Peace are Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan, former senior diplomat, and Vice Admiral Anup Singh, former commander of the Eastern Naval Command, who has served in different parts of the world. So, our lead topic for you in this edition of War and Peace, India and the world. So let's begin with Vice Admiral Anup Singh. Admiral, India is being viewed as an important economic and military power. Since when do you think this started to happen?
Well, actually it happened a long time ago, even during the Cold War era. And the Western powers were a little worried. They thought at that time that we were part of the Warsaw Pact or an ally of the Soviet Union. But all that was happening was that at that time, because from the mid-50s onward, we were denied new technologies and weapons from the West. Therefore, there was no alternative but to look towards the Soviet Union, which was very happy in assisting us in order to build a good relationship and make the most important nation within the Indian Ocean region strong enough. And when we started receiving military and technological assistance from the Soviet Union, India was looked at by the entire world as a very powerful emerging nation. But the real power and the real surge in strategic potential of India was witnessed in the mid-90s onwards. Because in the early 90s, you'll recall that we started becoming globalized, we opened up our economy, and at the same time we started looking across the world, not just at the Soviet Union, for all forms of military technology as well.
So from the 90s and now, what is that a special difference that you notice?
The special difference is, the fact is that money makes the mayor go. And in the 90s, our economy had just started developing after two episodes of devaluation in 91. Therefore, up to 95 and 96, we still did not have enough economic power and therefore could not buy too many things from either the West or the Russian Federation, because the Russian Federation also had become expensive. But the real surge started taking place in the early part of the millennium, from the year 2000 onwards, when economically we had started growing at a very healthy rate and we were able to afford acquisitions in all fields, starting from space, spend money on capital acquisitions in defense, as well as in industrialization of the country.
You spoke of Russia or
Yes.
the erstwhile Soviet Union.
Yes.
And now in the current security environment, both Russia and the United States are keen and simultaneously keen on strengthening ties with India. So what do you make of this?
Well, the fact is that everyone, in particular the United States, appreciates the fact that India can be a net security provider within the Indian Ocean region. The United States started appreciating the fact that India is not just an emerging power, but it is the only power which can actually be depended upon to look after security in the Indian Ocean, and also because of its historic reasons of being friendly to all nations, be depended upon to do the best in the form of cooperation with other IOR littorals. And therefore, it worked very well, because India was also looking for acquisitions of technology as well as platforms as in military as well as in civil fields from the West, rather than putting all eggs in one basket. But one point over here that I would like to make is that we have always insisted on transfer of technology, which is not an easy thing for any nation to part with, including the United States of America. But we make the best of a deal in trying to say, if not complete transfer of technology, we must get the know-how and do what is now being called Make in India.
Now let's understand this from the perspective of the ambassador, Ambassador Balakrishnan. Both the United States and Russia simultaneously are keen on strengthening their ties with India. So how do you explain this?
Well, this is because India's economy has grown, especially since the 90s, early 90s, after the reform. And now in terms of nominal, we are the 5th largest in the world, and in PPP terms, we are the 3rd largest economy in the world. So naturally, this is attractive in terms of business for both the US and for Russia. Russia, on the other hand, has gone through severe changes. The Soviet Union collapsed, and Russian state has then emerged from that, and now it's a very strong state under Putin, and it is expanding its outreach in the Middle East and other areas. So both countries want to have their linkages with India strong, because India is a key regional player, and they would like to have India on their side of what they want to do in the region. So as far as India is concerned, our approach has been to build relations with all major powers and not get involved with differences among them.
Exactly, Ambassador. In fact, to stretch this question a little further, what is it that is so special about India in current geopolitics that India is not untouchable for virtually any nation state in the world? Like, if India has its ties with Iran, Israel doesn't move backwards. And we have so many other examples. So it is not just the two erstwhile superpowers, Russia and the United States, but also the case with so many other important nation states when it is a question of building ties with India. How has diplomacy changed actually from this perspective?
I think diplomacy has become much more agile, especially after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and then the brief period where the United States was dominant, and then now again in a multipolar world. So I think our diplomacy has been agile, and we have tried to have a balance. For example, between Israel and the Arab states, we have tried to pursue our good relations on both sides, and to the extent that we can, we have tried to pursue our relations with the US and Iran. So the general approach has been to be flexible and pragmatic, and look after our own interests and try to avoid getting entangled in any kind of a conflict between other players.
And Ambassador, what examples can you think of, from your long career and experience as a senior diplomat, when the world started to take notice of India when you were posted abroad?
Well, I think in recent years the relationship...
Your own experience.
Mine has been more in the multilateral field. So there we have had to fight a big battle to get into the nuclear suppliers group. We have not yet there. Our nuclear posture has now got recognition as a responsible nuclear weapon state. We have got into 3 of the technology control regimes. The 4th one, nuclear suppliers group, I think is a matter of time. In terms of keeping a balance between those who want to push us into the NPT and those and our own requirements, we have managed to stay to get actually the best of both worlds. We have de facto got recognition as a nuclear weapon state without actually signing the NPT. Now that has caused some heartburning among some of the countries who are still opposing India's entry into the NSG. We have, of course, have to manage our relationship with China in a very nuanced way. There is conflict, there is cooperation, and there is competition, the 3 C's. And I would add there could also be a risk of communication problem, but with China it's relatively less. The same can be said with Pakistan. There we have a problem of both of communication as well as conflict.
You're watching War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. We will take a break now, after which we will give you a lot more insights. Please keep watching.
Informative, incisive, intensive. Get your daily dose of news and analysis in English News Night every weekday at 9 p.m. on DD India. Channel number 620 on Tata Sky, 199 on Dish TV, 150 on Airtel, 28 on UCN, and 395 on Videocon D2H.
Welcome back. You're watching War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. And in this edition of War and Peace, our lead topic for you is India and the world. That is, the rise of India, both in terms of economy and military prowess. And our guests for you in this edition of War and Peace are Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan, former senior diplomat, and Admiral Anup Singh, former Commander-in-Chief of the Eastern Naval Command. So, to go back to Admiral, can you think of some examples? How do you think the world started to take notice of the rise of India? As you said, it started in the 90s, but can you give us some examples from your personal experience?
Well, the first thing, as I said, was sometime in the middle of the 90s when the world noticed that all of a sudden we had liberalized our economy, and despite 2 episodes of devaluation in 1991, we had suddenly started growing at a very healthy rate, and it started looking at it at an open market economy, and it started now approaching all parts of the world for our needs and particularly for collaborations so that technology could be imbibed. One has to remember that we missed the Industrial Revolution because of having been colonized, and we were perhaps the only country in the so-called third world which was actually very actively progressing in terms of defense and space as well as medicine. Therefore, when we approached the West, it was not just because we wanted stuff from them. The West was also wooing India in various fields, in various manners. I'll give you an example. Just after the Pokhran 2 nuclear blast in 1998, in less than a year, while we were under sanctions and technology denial regime for almost a year, the French government, the then French president, sent a special envoy over here to find out what do we need insofar as defense needs are concerned, and also to find out what do we need in other fields insofar as modern technology is concerned.
Yes.
Now this triggered the rush for other Western nations to start breaking the paradigm of
such things continue to happen
That's
in the
right.
case of India.
That's right.
Surprisingly, with
That's
pleasant surprises.
That's right.
Now, Admiral, India's Navy, like you are a veteran from the Navy, India's Navy is required to safeguard the various sea routes of the world, the trade routes in the various seas and oceans of the world. So, how important is Indian Navy going to become, or how more important is it likely to become in near and distant future?
One has to appreciate the fact that India is blessed with a peninsula, and very few people in India and abroad realize the fact that this is the second largest peninsula in terms of real estate size in the world. and which is the largest? The Arabian Peninsula, comprising of 10 countries, including a landlocked country. India's peninsula at 2.2 million square kilometers, almost equal to the size of India's EEZ,
Sitting atop
is the second
Indian Ocean.
largest. That means you've
Right.
got access to on the three sides.
Right.
Now, after the end of the Cold War, apart from the fact that this is a great opportunity for having so many ports and shipbuilding yards and other nodes of economic engagement within the EEZ and beyond, there is also a huge responsibility on India to protect those sea lines of communication
So
or
India
trade routes.
is a natural naval power.
Yes.
And down the ages, in fact,
And
India
those
had this-
trade routes which have to pass very, very close to the western coast of India.
Right. Now to go back to Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan. Ambassador, what are some of the other factors? Like India is known to be a world leader in quite a few realms, like in the field of satellite technology, space, nuclear, and so on. So what kind of a mileage does India especially get out of these expertise?
Well, we have, of course, a large government-led programs in nuclear and space. Space, of course, has both the civilian and the strategic dimension with satellites. Largely, we have had to develop these large programs through our own efforts, with some collaboration from abroad. Happily, now the situation is much better. However, in the field of information technology, especially after the 90s, Indian trained manpower has made a huge impact in the IT field. It also got a big boost during the Y2K period in 2000, and of course our own government had an information technology policy which really stimulated the whole IT sector. So India has become regarded as a kind of world leader in the whole IT services sector, and that position has still remained. It's now of course faces some challenges in the area of artificial intelligence and so on, but I think our people have really moved up the ladder in the field of IT.
And very quickly, Ambassador, does it help that in geopolitics, simultaneously, India enjoys a fair amount of credibility as a democratic nation state?
Yes, I think over 70 years, each time we have elections is the largest election in human history. President Trump himself referred to that in his recent visit. So our elections are always the biggest in human history, no mistake about it. And there has never been any hiccup.
And something like this has a direct bearing on the security environment and geopolitics.
Not only
so
security.
Can you qualify that?
I think that we have maintained our democratic position, and within that framework we have tried to go ahead with our economic and social development, has a certain impact on the developing world. They look to India for many of its experiences in the field of development. For example, now that we have Digital India, Aadhaar, payment system, these are things which have a huge potential application across the developing world, and countries are looking up to India for, trying to do something similar.
In fact, India is being viewed as a developed country already in certain quarters.
Well, yes, I think some Western countries are trying to label India as a developed country, and therefore you don't deserve any trade preferences.
And to come to another point very quickly, Ambassador, how soon do you think India will be a versatile hub for defense hardware manufacture and exports, perhaps?
Yeah, I think this process has now kicked off during this term of the government. The government is serious about going into defense manufacturing and defense exports. The recent Def Expo held in Lucknow was a fairly big success, and I think the scope for, we have FDI liberalization. Foreign companies are willing to come here to make components, sub-assemblies. We are purchasing from much wider range of sources our defense equipment. So I think the scope for Indian companies to get into defense manufacturing is very good. The economic policies have been shaped up, and we have this parallel with the automobile sector. At one time we had only the Fiat and the Ambassador. Then the sector was liberalized, foreign players came in, and now we are making cars and exporting them to other countries.
Right. In fact, just about 2 decades back, there were speculations that India would perhaps become a hub for second-hand car imports. but far from that. India is a car exporter, automobile exporter now. So we will take another quick break. You are watching War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. And our guests for you in this edition of War and Peace are Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan, former senior diplomat, and Vice Admiral Anup Singh, former commander of the Eastern Naval Command, who has served in different parts of the world. Please keep watching.
Informative, incisive, intensive. Get your daily dose of news and analysis in English News Night every weekday at 9 p.m. on DD India. Channel number 620 on Tata Sky, 199 on Dish TV, 150 on Airtel, 28 on UCN, and 395 on Videocon D2H.
Welcome back. You're watching War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. So before the break, we went into the reasons why India is viewed as both a military power and also as an economic powerhouse. Now, we will bring you a vignette from our file shot segment on an epitome of communal harmony. This was recorded in a remote village in Punjab some years ago. On the way to Ludhiana from Chandigarh, in the middle of the vast expanse of rural land, is situated this quiet village called Sarwarpur. If you come here in your formal gear, you might feel out of place in this little rural center where only bicycles are suitable for negotiating village roads. But when you soak in the ambience, you at once feel at home. Children and adults offer you a warm welcome in unison. Together, they are a group of messengers of peace and communal harmony. Sikhs, Muslims and Hindus make up this group. And the high point of their message came in the form of a freshly built and painted mosque at a site next to the village Gurdwara. A group of Sikh gentlemen organized resources to ready the mosque and hand it over to the Muslims in the village. The Shiromani Gurdwara Prabandhak Committee was involved in the process.
We are two brothers, one living in England, I am living here. We decided to build a mosque here. As we concerned man Tafair Muhammad, we contact them and talk about the mosque. At last they said you can do anything, and we made this mosque as we can do.
हाँ, बाकी ये जो गांव है हमारा, इन लोगों ने हमारा हर तरह से सहयोग दिया है, आज तक देते हैं, पहले से भी, क्योंकि हम लोकल हैं, कहीं गए नहीं.
From what we can see, the Sarwarpur village has all the potential of becoming a little hub from where both rural and urban centers can draw inspiration and spread the message of peace and communal harmony. Well, Ambassador, in this vignette we actually see how a group of Sikhs built a mosque in the Sarwarpur village of Punjab. Now, these examples of communal harmony are not quite rare in India, Ambassador.
Yes, I think we are a multicultural, multilingual, multi-ethnic society. I mean, if you look at, we have 23 languages, official languages, we have 28 states. We are like the European Union, except we are much more closely integrated. And we have grown and developed working with each other over the last 70 years. So these are bonds which cannot be broken, even though you may have a few incidents now and then. But the overwhelming majority of Indians have learned to live and work together with each other. In fact, we depend on each other.
Right. And Admiral Anup Singh, what would you like to add?
The fact that we have survived all prophets of doom's sayings goes to prove actually the litmus test lay in times of crisis where there was no difference between communities. Whenever the country...
That is the essence of India.
That was the essence of India.
Right. And taking into account all those quotients that we discussed in this edition of War and Peace, how would you like to finally look at the future and the rise of India?
Well, the first requirement of a developing nation, and particularly I go back to the term part of the third world, lies in becoming self-reliant. And we embarked on this mission right at the time of independence, and particularly the defense services, where we said we cannot be expected to be dependent on the West, whether it was our colonial power or on the East. Even in the Soviet days, we started saying that everything that comes over here, we must be given an opportunity to understand how that
So India
technology
is always
was formed.
strong. That's what you're saying.
That's right. And
Right. So on that strong note, we come to the end of this edition of War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. If you wish to write to us, you can send your emails to warandpeace2004@hotmail.com. You can also send your letters to War and Peace, Room 513, Tower B, Doordarshan Bhavan, Copernicus Marg, New Delhi 110001. So thank you, Ambassador Bhaskar Balakrishnan. Thank you, Admiral Anup Singh. And thank you all. Bye-bye.